What is going on, everybody, and welcome to the Friday edition. It's Friday, right? It is Friday, everybody. The Friday edition of the Stochastic NHL Strategy Show. I am your host, Josh Harris. I don't understand. I'm prepared. I'm always prepared, and as soon as that countdown ends, my mind just goes blank. So I'm terrible at intros, but here we are. Last night was interesting, we could say. If you are like a gambler and you bet on the Sens, you could almost believe that Linus Ullmark was shaving points last night.
Listen, man, I am not the one. I am not a person to give the Sens much benefit of the doubt or really give them any breaks of any sort. That game is 1,000,000% on Ullmark. I would say at least 3 of those goals an AHL goalie would have saved, if not 4. And it was brutal to see.
Yeah, we did have a winner in our Discord. It was Schindler's List. I don't know. I forget your actual nickname, but
it's R. Schindler.
R. Schindler. I'm terrible with names, so I have to put nicknames to it. But he's like, I woke up to a bank. Pulling a Jake Harry is never a bad thing. Falling asleep and waking up to money. Congrats to you. That is a very good lineup. Looks like got the Jesper Bratt hat trick. Man, what a road trip for the Devils. Unfortunately, they are very for real. But congrats. On that
yeah, I mean, you and I talked about it before the season when we were doing our best ball streams, right? Yeah. They were not a playoff team last year, and it would depend on the site you would look at and all that. But most betting sites I saw had them top 5 for Stanley Cup odds. I think people were expecting a big bounce back from this team. I don't know if they're the best team in the NHL or anything like that, but they're certainly a cup contender, and they're certainly one of the 4 or 5 best teams out east. So yeah, especially with the brutal schedule to start, right? Because they started in Europe, and I think in the first 14 days of their season, they had 7 games, but 2 of those games were in Europe, and 4 of those games were back-to-backs. And after 20 games. They're pacing for 105 points or something like that. So, yeah, a real good start to the season for the Devils.
And, yeah, people will be like, oh, yeah, it's because they got a goalie and Hughes is healthy. I think it's because Hamilton and Siegenthaler are healthy. But,
man, that Kovacevic-Siegenthaler pairing, low-key, I wrote about them over at my Substack. Low-key, arguably the best defensive pairing, at least defensively, maybe not offensively, but at least defensively in the NHL this season, up there with probably Brodin and Spurgeon in Minnesota. It's in Gavrikov Anderson in Los Angeles. It's incredible. They have legit been one of the best defensive pairs in the league.
Yeah. And to the opposite end of the spectrum, the first shift of the night for the Rangers, Lindgren Trouba got hemmed in their own zone by the Sharks for 75 seconds and gave up 4 shots on goal.
Hey, man, the Rangers won. So 2 points is 2 points. Just kind of take it and run, I guess. At least the Fox-Miller pairing looked good.
Yeah. I don't care that they won. I just want to know that Hedl doesn't have another concussion. So,
yeah,
I mean, they won't confirm that.
Before we get too far, I do want to shout out Bots, Jeff Ottler, favorite around these stochastic parts. He took down, I think it was second in the $40 last night. And it was one of those nights where you had multiple paths to the top. We just showed our Schindler takedown with Rangers and Devils, and Vots finished second in the 40 for $2,000, I think. He had Tampa Bay and Dallas too. So multiple paths to the top last night. Congrats to Vots. He had a 20x night last night. So a real good night for him.
Yeah, multiple paths to victory. I took a detour somewhere and exited onto the New Jersey Turnpike and didn't cash, but we're back tonight where you can have a chance to hit the nuts. And here we are. This is a pretty wild 5-game slate, if I may say so myself. everyone has a total between 2.9 and 3.7. Like Colorado has a 3.7, but everyone else is between 2.9 and 3.4. There's a lot of ownership on some of these cheaper top lines, but like for a 5-game slate, I enjoy this one so far until I don't cash. Then I won't enjoy it. But how are you feeling on this slate?
Yeah, I like it too. The one thing, like we'll get to Colorado shortly. The one thing I wish is that Valeri Nichushkin was actually in the player pools, which he's not.
He's in. He's in on DK now at 7K.
Oh, did they add him? Oh,
at 7K,
yeah. Okay. I mean, coming in hot at 7K, I guess.
Well, no, I was talking to Line Matching about that, and he was like, "Oh, they put him in 7K. It's ridiculous." It could have been way worse. He could have been on IR at min price, and they forgot that he got activated.
Yeah, it could have been a Lehkonen situation, right? Where Lehkonen, what was he, like 3,300 in his first game or something like that? And like his price has gone up like 2,200 or something since then. It's like, so yeah, I guess we'll take it.
Yeah, I'll take the overprice compared to the min price. That would have been ridiculous. But let's get into this slate. We were rambling. We're dilly-dalliers, as my ex-wife would call me. That's why she's my ex. But before we get into the show, into the games, if you want to sign up for premium, you can click the link in the chat. Use promo code Stochastic15, and you get 15% off your first week or month. As you know, Tyson versus Jake Paul tonight. That's not why I'm transitioning into fighting, but there's also a big UFC card this weekend, pay-per-view in Madison Square Garden. Johnny Bones Jones defending his heavyweight belt. So if you want to get access to our MMA stuff, The Sims and all the great stuff there, Sims projections, ownership projections, click on the chat or click on the link in the chat. Use promo code BONES. That'll get you access for $1 this weekend. You can obviously do monthly if you want. This weekend will be $1. It will renew after that. Let me regroup and let's get into this slate. Pittsburgh Penguins with a 3.4 total heading into Columbus. The Blue Jackets have a 3.1 total. I'm still not used to saying that the Blue Jackets having totals over 3, but it definitely isn't the first time this season. It won't be the last. Columbus is going Monahan, Marchenko, Voronkov, Chinnikov, Fantilli, Sillinger. They broke up Provorov and Werenski last game. I think they're still broken up, which is actually good because it gives a puck driver on the blue line for the second line as well. There are a couple lines that I like on Columbus here. Obviously, Monahan, Marchenko, Voronkov does tickle the fancy here. 6.7% projected ownership, 6.7% top two stacks, 7.1% projected ownership at 15,100. It doesn't really matter the matchup. Now, obviously, the Crosby line is worse defensively than Malkin Rust. But really, at the end of the day, no one's worse the wear who they go out against. Probably butchered that saying, but, it popped into my head. I'm fine with Monahan, Marchenko, Voronkov. Strangely enough, when we talked about this briefly before the show, Chinnikov, Fantilli, Sillinger at 14.4 has the higher top two stack at 7.7%. And they're also getting more ownership at 10.9% projected. I think it's kind of like a dealer's choice who you want to go to. I slightly lean to Monahan, Marchenko, Voronkov, the more expensive with less ownership, but I'm completely fine with Chinnikov, Fantilli, Sillinger, and Fantilli's back on the top power play unit, but this isn't a great power play matchup. Penguins aren't great 5-on-5 defensively, but they have a decent penalty kill. And, so for that reason, I'll just go Monahan, Marchenko, Voronkov. The Pittsburgh side is a bit crazier. There's a lot of ownership here. Crosby, Raquel, Beauvillier, 17,000, 16.2% projected ownership. Malkin, Rust, Bunting, 13.5% projected ownership. This is a very good power play spot. The problem is the Penguins' power play is atrocious. They had a really good spot the other night as well. They had a number of power plays and they did nothing with it. I think, like, if you want to go to Crosby or Raquel, because they've been shooting a bunch, I think that's fine. I slightly prefer Malkin, Rust, Bunting just because you get Malkin and Rust on the top power play unit. You're saving a little bit of money. Bunting's a shooter. He's super cheap. Like, I like Beauvillier, but I don't think the Penguins do. And I don't think he's going to last the full game there if they're losing. Drew O'Connor could move up. You know what I mean? Like, Pustainen can move up. I don't fully trust that Beauvillier is going to stay there. I have more faith that Bunting will stay there. But really, you could just go like Crosby, Malkin, Rust if you're, looking for an expensive power play stack, because this is one of the best power play spots they have. But for me, it's the Monahan line, the Malkin line, completely fine with the Crosby line. But I think you could even do some sort of Pittsburgh power play stack.
Yeah, I want to start. I want to start on the Columbus side because a couple of things here. You and I talk about how good the top line, in its different iterations has been for Columbus this year. Generally, it's just revolved around Monahan and Marchenko. So, like, whether it's been Sillinger, Chinnikov, now it's Voronkov, they've been really good. One thing I want to point out about that is who they're playing with on defense. Sean Monahan, 60% of his 5-on-5 ice time comes with Zach Werenski on the ice. I think that's pretty important because, I like Dante Fabro as a defenseman. I like Damon Severson as a defenseman. Zach Werenski is by far their best offensive defenseman, whether you want to look at puck moving, creating in the offensive zone, it doesn't matter. I think that matters when you're looking, over the course of a full season for goal scoring for that lineup 5-on-5. So for that reason, I kind of like Monahan, Marchenko, and Voronkov a little bit more here. Like, you mentioned, they're coming in with a little bit less top two stack percentage. They are a little bit more expensive, $15,100. That's perfectly fine. Like, I'm a Voronkov fan. Like, you and I talk about Pavel Dorofeyev in Vegas. We'll talk about him later in the show. Like, Voronkov kind of reminds me of him in a little way. Like, they both get to the net pretty well. Sean Monahan, very good creating below the face-off dots. Like, obviously, Marchenko can kind of score from anywhere. They'll play a lot with Werenski. I'm not worried about these Pittsburgh. Like, you mentioned how it doesn't matter what the matchup is. Like, Crosby and Beauvillier, 3.7 expected goals against. Malkin and Rust, 3.1 expected goals against. Like, they're both bad. And the other thing is Chris Letang isn't playing tonight for Pittsburgh. Now, like most of the team, he hasn't been very good defensively at 5-on-5. But on the penalty kill, it's kind of a different situation. He has been one of the best, probably the best penalty killer for Pittsburgh this year. Certainly best penalty killer on the blue line, and they can't replace him. They cannot replace him on the PK. Maybe they can get away with it at 5-on-5. They cannot get away with it on the penalty kill. I think that makes it a little bit better of a power play spot for Columbus. Columbus doesn't draw a ton of power play opportunities. That does worry me. They're only at 2.5 per game. League average is about 3.1, so obviously they're well below that. But I do think it's a better power play spot for them than if Letang was in, that's for sure. So I do like Columbus one. Monahan, Marchenko, Voronkov, certainly considering them here in my single entry. Can also say, like, I say it repeatedly, I don't line NHL games. Like, I don't run simulations or anything like that. I just take Vegas game totals and goal totals and whatever and make my fantasy projections off of that. I don't know why Pittsburgh has a higher team total here. Like, are they the better team? I'm not entirely sure that they are. Like, Pittsburgh is not a good tean.
It's the name value, I think.
And they're on the road. So, like, I don't know. Monahan, Marchenko, and Voronkov at 7.1%, or the Malkin, Rust, Bunting line at twice the ownership. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, that feels like a pretty easy decision to me. So I'll go Columbus 1. If you want to play Columbus 2, I think that's perfectly fine. I'll mention Columbus 3 briefly because Danforth and Matthew Olivier have been pretty good together this season. They're up to 105 minutes, 2.9 expected goals for, 2.4 actual goals for. It's a little bit below average, but it's not bad. I'm not, especially with the Lars Eller gone, I'm not worried about any matchups on the Pittsburgh side. I only mention them because Colorado's on this slate. Colorado's is $1 billion again to roster. So, if you are playing them, you will need some very cheap guys. I do think that Columbus third line would at least be in consideration if I'm playing Colorado. But I do like Columbus one the best. On the Pittsburgh side, it's like, oh man, how many more times can I do this? The
What's
Pittsburgh
the definition of insanity?
Yeah, I will say Crosby and Beauvillier, they have created well enough so far this season. 3.3 expected goals, only 2.5 actual goals though. Not shooting percentage is kind of low. They're probably going to see a lot of that Monahan line. The Monahan, Werenski have been pretty good at 5-on-5 this season. League average by expected goals against, actual goals against lower than that. I would probably dip down to Pittsburgh too. Malkin, Rust, Bunting. Like Malkin and Bunting were really good towards the end of last season after the trade. Malkin and Rust so far this season, 3.4 expected goals, 5.6 actual goals. And honestly, you get that Werenski pairing off the ice. I'm not sure how good the Columbus pairings are going to go. I think Provorov-Severson can be fine, but I'm not going to assume that they're going to be fine given this is still the Columbus Blue Jackets. I would probably prefer Pittsburgh 2 here. Power play spot isn't bad, but Pittsburgh's power play is. So I'm not worried about leaving Bunting off to put on Raquel or stack with Crosby or something like that. I would just straight go 5-on-5 line. So I think it's the Monahan line for me from Columbus is what I prefer in this game overall. I think the Malkin line is certainly in play here. You might want to dip down to Columbus 3 if you're playing Colorado here tonight.
We are on the same page. Has there been a bigger career resurgence over the past few years than Sean Monahan? He looked like he was dust in Calgary.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, I think it's between him and Jamie Benn. I think it's kind of illustrative that you get to your late 20s, early 30s. Maybe you have hip surgeries or whatever. You might need a couple years to work your way back, and we're kind of seeing the same thing with Tyler Seguin, though not to the same degree. So I just think, we should probably keep that in mind, that when a guy has hip surgery, maybe he comes back, but he might need honestly a full year to get back up to speed, even when he's healthy.
I mean, even if you're young, you saw Caulfield last year struggle with the shoulder surgery, scoring goals at a higher rate this year. So I don't know. I'm not a scientist. Washington Capitals with a 2.9 total heading into Colorado. The Avs have a 3.7. It's insane how fast the perception of a team changes when they're healthy. Before we're like, man, this team is thin. And now all of a sudden, Colorado's top 6 is McKinnon, Rantanen, Lehkonen, Middlestad, Drouin, and Nishushkin. Third line of Wood, Parker Kelly, Logan O'Connor. That is a deep team now all of a sudden.
And that's still without Ross Colton or Gabriel Landeskog.
Yeah, and Colton's going to be out for another month, and then who knows if Landeskog's ever going to come back. But this is a deep team because they're already deep on the blue line. Their issue is in net, but their issue has been in net for years now. It is Justice Anuin in net tonight for Colorado. Washington is good. And it's just they signed everybody. Literally, it felt like they signed 50% of the free agents in the offseason. But and I was questioning it because I'm like, oh, they're just trying to put a little bit of a talent around Ovechkin, and they'll probably just be a middling fight for a playoff type team. But man, this top 6 has been really good. I'm glad they're sticking with Strome Ovechkin because Ovechkin plays his best with Strome. Vice versa. Protas hasn't looked out of place. Wilson McMichael Dubois has been a very good line. And now you throw Eller in between Mangiapane and Vrana. And you have a fourth line that they like with Dowd and Radish and Duhaime, which is good defensively. it does worry me that you're going to might start to see a little bit of a Seattle situation in terms of ice time, but that's not for tonight. Colorado won 24,300, fully correlated, 42.2% top two stack, 15.2% projected ownership. So like bombs away on the top two stack, positive leverage, 15% projected ownership. It's just because they're so expensive. And like Rantanen's coming off a natural hat trick. McKinnon's shot rate is coming up. It's still down from the previous years, but Lehkonen is still in the mid fives where it's not like super insane. This is a pretty tough matchup though. Like, and I wouldn't have said that to start the season. They're absolutely matchup proof though. So it's just a question if you want to commit almost half your salary to a line here on a 5-game slate. I'm not sure that I am, but there are so many cheap lines you can play them with. So I obviously haven't started to cut down on my single entry lineup, and obviously salary agnostic, they're my favorite line of the night, but you throw in the salary and it's a little bit prohibitive. Now the second line, Middlestat, Drouin, Nishushkin is 15.8, and you're only getting Casey Middlestat on the top power play. Nishushkin at 7K is overpriced. Like, I don't think like Drouin and Nishushkin are going to come back and play 18, 19, 20 minutes tonight. You know what I mean? You're still going to see these the top line guys play 20, 21, 22 minutes. You probably see Casey Middlestat at 18 because of the top power play time, but I wouldn't be shocked to see Drouin and Nishushkin at 15, 16 minutes tonight just to get their feet wet. So I think it would really only be Colorado 1 for me. On the Washington side, I'm probably going to McMichael Wilson, Dubois. They're cheaper than Ovechkin, Strome, Protas. 18.4 on the road seems a little bit expensive. Like, they're more expensive than Pittsburgh. And they have the lowest road total on the night. You have Pittsburgh with a higher total, Nashville with a higher total, Vegas with a higher total, and Detroit with a higher total. And I'm seeing in chat, no, they ran lines. They said it was going to be McKinnon, Rantanen, and Lehkonen. So for me, it would be Colorado 1, Washington 2. I think, Washington 1's fine, but it's a little bit pricey for me on a 5-game slate with the lowest road total.
Yeah, I'm going to start on the Colorado side. I think we mentioned this on the last time that Washington was on the show, which I think was Wednesday. The reason the Capitals are finding their success this year is kind of twofold. One, obviously, they're shooting the lights out at even strength. Like, Washington's the highest scoring team at even strength on a per minute basis. They're scoring basically 10% more, like 9% more than any other team in the NHL. A big reason they're doing that is because they're shooting 14.6% at even strength, which is like, that's really high. But it's their offense that has been carrying them. It hasn't been their defense. At even strength by expected goals against, the Washington Capitals are 25th in the league. They're worse than Detroit, to kind of put that into perspective. By goals against, they're 18th and worse than Utah. They've just been outscoring whatever defensive problems they've had at even strength. Like, this is a good 5-on-5 matchup for that Colorado top line. It is a really good one. And obviously that Colorado top line, 75, they're up, 75. They were up around 25 minutes at times. I agree with you. That's going to get throttled back here. I imagine all three guys are still going to get over 20 minutes, but I think the days of seeing 26 minutes for some of those guys are behind us. I do think it's a good 5-on-5 matchup for them. It's not necessarily a good power play matchup because Washington does have a good penalty kill. That's the other thing that's kind of holding them together this season. Capitals 6th fewest shot attempts per minute on the penalty kill, 8th fewest shots against per minute on the penalty kill, 5th fewest goals. Obviously, Colorado's power play is good enough to shred anybody. Washington is above average by time shorthanded per game. They're at 3.2. League average is about 3.1. So, maybe Colorado just goes like 1 for 4 here tonight. I'll say it every time Colorado's on the slate. I have no problem playing Colorado 1. It's just at 24,300. Do you have cheap guys? Anaheim is on this slate. Half their team is basically under, most of their teams basically under 4K. So there are cheap guys that you can play elsewhere. I have no issue playing Colorado here. I don't think this is a tough matchup for them, especially at even strength. Power play might be a different story, but I think it's perfectly fine. You're seeing a huge total. But I have no issue playing the Avs. Because it's not a great power play matchup, I do think that brings Colorado 2 into play a little bit. The thing is like Drouin and Nichushkin really haven't played a ton together. Now, Nichushkin did play with Middlestat down the stretch last year, and they weren't really that good together. Like about average, honestly, offensively. That's what kind of worries me is that Drouin first game back since the first game of the season, Nichushkin first game since the spring. Drouin and Nichushkin really haven't played together. Nichushkin and Middlestat really weren't that good together when they did get time. Because Drouin and Nichushkin are on the second power play unit, I would say that I'm probably not that interested. But I do think because this is a better even strength and power play matchup, that Colorado 2, at least if you're playing 20 max, 150, whatever, should get some consideration. But I really do like Colorado 1 here. Obviously, the Washington side is kind of interesting because we know the issues that Colorado has had goaltending wise. Going to be honest though, over like the last couple of weeks, it has gotten a lot better. Annunen, you mentioned starting in net tonight. Colorado, their save percentage, I was just looking for the month of November. It's not good, but it's not like bottom of the league terrible. It's like fringe bottom 10. And Colorado defensively has been fine, but the top line has been a little leaky defensively. I think that kind of brings the Washington line into play. You mentioned Ovechkin, Strome, Protas, how well they're playing. 3.6 expected goals, 6.7 actual goals. The reason I'm hesitant to play them isn't because of their price or the matchup necessarily. It's that they're still shooting nearly 20% at 5-on-5. Like we talked about this with Vegas, right? With Eichel and Stone. Eventually that was going to have to come crashing down. Their shooting percentage was eventually going to have to come crashing down. Now Eichel's still been largely fine, but I'll mention almost all of Eichel's success lately has come on the power play. It hasn't been at even strength. Washington's power play has certainly struggled this year. It has been better with McMichael. I would probably just save the money and go down to Washington 2. Wilson, McMichael, and Dubois. You mentioned they have been playing well. They have indeed been playing well so far this season. 3.8 expected goals, 4.6 actual goals, a much more reasonable 12.6% shooting. McMichael and Wilson have been the two most used forwards for Washington in the month of November. They're the only forwards getting over 18 minutes a game. So you get more ice time. You get 2 out of 3 on the top power play unit. Maybe Drouin and Nichushkin have to knock some of the rust off and aren't their normal selves here tonight, and Washington 2 actually gets a decent matchup. I don't mind Washington 2 here. The thing is like at 15K, I would probably just rather go play Columbus. Like that's just kind of the way that I look at it. But I think Washington 2 would be the side that I prefer. But I think this is still a Colorado game. It's just whether you want to pay up nearly 25K for the top line.
Yeah. It's an insane sentence. Like, I'd rather go play Columbus too. It's like, what are we doing?
I mean, they are playing the Penguins. and they are, it's like if Tristan Jarry isn't fixed, we saw how those first 2 weeks of the season went.
I mean, last year is an eye problem. This year it's a conditioning problem. It's like, okay. Nashville Predators with a 3.1 total heading into Calgary. The Flames have a 2.9. Excuse me. Nashville lost to Edmonton in overtime last night. We don't know what their lines are going to look like tonight. I don't know if they switched them up in game yesterday.
They didn't.
I was sleeping by then. So, excuse me. I would imagine They are status quo, but if you are interested in playing Nashville, that is something you need to pay attention to. Calgary did mix up their lines. They're going Sharon Govich, Huberdeau, Zari, Coleman, Backlund, Coronado, Kadri, Kuzmenko, Pospisil. They also switched up their power play units. Sharon Govich, Huberdeau, Zari are fully correlated on one unit. Kadri, Kuzmenko, Pospisil are correlated on another unit. I always just want to give coaches the biggest shout out ever when they can't get one power play unit going. Their idea is to try to get two going. Never works, but that does give you two cheap, fully correlated lines that fit with Colorado. I mean, it was Wedgwood last night, so it will be Saros tonight, but Calgary gets to dictate matchups here. I would imagine the Kadri Kuzmenko Pospisil line is going to go out against the middle six in Nashville. Like, it doesn't really matter if we're being honest here. I kind of prefer Kadri Kuzmenko Pospisil. Like, I just think Kadri is the best player on that team. Like, if you want to go to Sharon Govich, Huberdeau, Zari for the Weegar unit, like, that's fine. But for $100 less with a little bit of higher top two stack, there is a lot more ownership. But I prefer Kadri Kuzmenko Pospisil. It's the Rasmus Anderson unit for 11-4 in a good 5-on-5 matchup, a good power play matchup. I think both Calgary 1 and Calgary 3 are in play if you're looking to play Colorado. I also think Coleman, Backlund, Coronado is fine. Just the correlation on the units there is a little bit funky. So I'd probably go to Kadri 1, Sharangovich 2, and then Backlund 3. On the Nashville side, I'm not super worried they're going to switch their lines, but at 19-4 back-to-back on the road, again, they're kind of priced in no man's land. Like, at that point, if I'm going to stay in that range and not go to Colorado, it would probably be to Vegas. So Nashville 1's fine because it is the Flames and they're not a very good team. But it is a later start. Colorado does start at that time and Vegas is after them. So there's swaps, but if you're playing single entry and you're playing Nashville and you have the slightest concern that they're going to, swap Stamkos and Marshall So or something like that, it is in the back of my head that have a swap ready. I still think they're fine. They're just in a weird price range for me. You know what I mean? Detroit is $1,600 cheaper. You have those Pittsburgh lines who are, $2,000 to $3,000 cheaper. You got the Blue Jackets that are $4,000 cheaper. So if you're doing mid-range stacking, who you really going to put Nashville 1 with? I guess you can jam them in with, a $13,000, $14,000 line. But if you start dipping down into the super cheaps, then you're going to get into the people that are stacking with Colorado, and those super cheap lines are going to have more ownership than they should. I'm wildly overthinking this right now, but to me, they're just priced in no man's land. They're fine, but Calgary is a perfect filler for Colorado.
Yeah, you're really talking yourself out of Nashville here, eh? Yeah, I'll start on the Calgary side. You prefer Kadri. I think I prefer the Sharangovich Huberdeau Zari line. As you mentioned, both lines are perfectly correlated on the power play. It's for a couple reasons. One, Sharangovich and Huberdeau have actually played reasonably well together this season. It's not a big sample. We're talking 65 minutes, so maybe 6-7 games worth of ice time. But 2.5 expected goals for, 1.9 against. They're not giving up a ton. They're actually kind of driving the play. They are perfectly correlated. They're less than half the ownership at nearly the same top two stack percentage. The thing is, for me, is I don't know if the power play correlation really matters. Nashville has struggled this year. The two things that they do have had, generally speaking, is a good power play and a good penalty kill. To So I'm not sure it's really like that good of a power play matchup for Calgary. Like I was looking at the penalty kill numbers over the last month, like over the last 4 weeks. Nashville's giving up fewer goals per minute than any other team in the league. And their shots per minute is like top 5. So shots against per minute, sorry. So like the penalty kill has been really good. I'm not sure that the power play matchup matters. I think what matters most is 5-on-5 matchups, because that Nashville middle six is not good defensively. The Stamkos Nyquist duo, or Stamkos Nyquist, Marchessault Nyquist duo has been a horror show defensively. Tomasino Evangelista, worse than league average. I think that's the type of 5-on-5 matchups that Sharon Govich, Huberdeau, and Zari can kind of take advantage of. And that you, like you said, they are one of those lines that can fit in with Colorado. 3.5% or 3.6% top 2 stack, 4% ownership. Again, less than half than Kadri, Kuzmenko, Pospisil. I think they'd be one of the lines that I would very much be considering tonight if I was looking to play Colorado. I think Kadri, Kuzmenko, and Pospisil, like I have no issue with playing them. That line over the last couple of years had generally been able to create pretty well. 3.5 expected goals for, shooting about 11%. I kind of worry about ice time a little bit. Kadri might get a lot. I'm not sure that Kuzmenko and Pospisil will. Whereas I think Sharon Govich, Huberdeau, and Zari, like Sharon Govich, Huberdeau, and Zari are 3 of the 5 Calgary forwards getting 15 minutes of even strength time per game this month. The other 2 are Kadri and Backlund, and they're on different lines. So I do think that they might end up the most used even strength line for Calgary here tonight. And again, they're perfectly correlated. So I think it's the Sharon Govich line for me. But yeah, like Kadri's perfectly fine. No issue with playing them, especially where they're all the same price. On the Nashville side, I think I do have a little bit more interest in Nashville one. For this reason is like Calgary's penalty kill was really good through like the first few games of the season. But again, I was looking over the last 4 weeks. Calgary giving up the 6th most shot attempts against per minute on the penalty kill, and the 6th most goals against per minute on the penalty kill. And Nashville's power play has been amongst the best in the league, like top 5, like not quite Detroit, Ottawa, but also because they're not shooting 30%. They are just generating a ton. Like this is Nashville. If Nashville has one thing, it is an excellent power play. And I actually think this is a pretty good power play matchup for them. That Nashville top line, as you mentioned, is perfectly correlated. 18.4% top 2 stack, 10% ownership. There are playable 11 to 13K lines all across this slate. So I like that price of 19.4 doesn't really worry me. I'm not even super concerned about the matchup going up against the Backlund Coronado line. Like, yes, they are good defensively. But I think it's such a good power play matchup. Like they can double down on the power play pretty easily, get one at even strength through the empty net or something like that, and then you're laughing. So I really do like Nashville one here, especially if they only come in at like 10% ownership. They have, I think it's like the 3rd highest top 2 stack of the night, and they're barely top 10 by ownership, and it's only a 5-game slate. So I really do like Nashville one. I also really do like that Sharon Govich line. That's probably where I'm looking in this game.
We agree to disagree on this game. That happens. We're human. Vegas Golden Knights with a 3.3 total heading into Utah. The Soakers have a 3.1. Was it Washington who's going to Utah soon? Did you see that video on their Twitter?
No.
They were asking the players to pick out Utah on the map, and none of the American guys besides Lindgren figured it out. Like Logan Thompson, who played in Vegas, picked Nevada. It's like, what? But anyway, that was a fun video. But anyway, this is an interesting game. Like it's a 6.5 total. There's not a lot of ownership here. These Utah lines have been killing me though. Like I cannot stand these lines. I think if I would play a Utah line here tonight, it would be Genther, Cooley, Michelli at 12-2, 4.1% top 2 stacks, 6.8% projected ownership. Like not awful negative leverage there. Vegas mixed up their lines the last game and they're sticking with them. Like, there's nothing that really scares me defensively on Vegas. The one thing that I do worry about is they don't take any penalties. Not that this is, not that Utah's power play is anything crazy, but I would go to Cooley, Michelli, Genther. Like, I'm fine with Bukestad, Schmaltz, and Keller. Like, Schmaltz and Keller have played well this season. It's been 16 games, and Schmaltz doesn't have a goal yet, which is kind of worrisome. I don't know how Nick Bukestad really fits in on that line. Cooley and Genther have a long history together. Michelli's probably one of their best playmakers. That would be the line I would go to on Utah. Vegas going with Eichel, Barbashev, Dorofeyev, Hurdle, Roy, and Kolesar, and then Carlson, Howden, and Holtz. Again, just like I talked about in Nashville, they're kind of priced in no man's land. I do prefer them a little bit to Nashville. They're a little bit lower owned. Not that it's a huge deal. Like, they're both 10. Like, Nashville's 10%, Vegas is 8% on a 5-game slate. Dorofeyev getting moved up is interesting because they're really this team hurts for offense when Stone is hurt, and he's hurt a lot. But moving Dorofeyev up, I think, is going to help that line. Like, Barbashev and Eichel haven't been that great at 5-on-5 this season. It was shooting percentage driven. You did say that most of Eichel's damage has been on the power play, and this is a very good power play spot. You get Dorofeyev and Eichel on the top power play unit. Again, the issue to me is they're kind of priced in no man's land. At that price, I'm either probably just going to spend up for Colorado or do some sort of mid-range build. But again, I haven't really dug into how I'm going to build my single entry. I do slightly prefer Vegas to Nashville. I know Cliffy, I think, is on the other way around there, but I'm kind of interested in Eichel, Dorofeyev. The second line of Hurdle, Roy, Kolesar, they're kind of in that filler basket at where they fit with Colorado. You know what I mean? You get Hurdle and Roy on the top power play unit. They're fine as a filler because they're not getting a ton of ownership. I think, that's one of, you see Calgary getting a fair bit of ownership. You see this Utah line getting a fair bit of ownership. There's not much ownership there. It's a good power play spot. I don't mind Vegas too. So it would be Cooley, Genther, Michelli, and then Vegas 1 for me.
This is what worries me is I think Vegas actually did score on the power play in their last game, and that was after I was saying that the power play might struggle without Mark Stone. I mean, here we go. It is a good power play spot for them. Utah takes 3.6 minor penalties per game on the season. It's the 6th most in the league. And it's the most of any team on the slate here tonight. Vegas has had a good power play this season. Almost all of that time was with Mark Stone, though. And I do worry, can they keep that success going without Mark Stone? That's kind of the issue because Utah has actually been a pretty good 5-on-5 team this season. Again, I was looking at just the last 4 weeks. Over the last 4 weeks, Utah is 8th by expected goals against per 60 at 5-on-5 in the league and top 3 by actual goals against. So they're not really giving up a ton at 5-on-5. If you look at full season metrics, they're about fringe top 10 by both measures, expected goals against and actual goals against. This is a good 5-on-5 team. So I think Vegas would have to get there on the power play, and I worry about the power play without Mark Stone. I kind of agree. If I'm going to pay $19K-ish, whatever for a line, this Vegas line is $19.8. I'll just go play Nashville instead. I think that's kind of the way that I look at it. If I were to play anything in this game from Vegas, I think I would dip down. I would go to the second or third lines. Obviously, Hurdle and Roy makes a lot of sense because of the power play. Carlson and Holtz is kind of interesting. They're at 2.9 goals per 60 together so far this season. I do worry a little bit about ice time and whether they'll get broken up or whatever. I think I prefer the Vegas second and third lines over the top line because honestly, again, if I'm going to pay $19,000 whatever for a line, I'm just going to go play Nashville instead. So For me, this is a game about Utah. It's just about figuring out where to go on Utah. Like, I honestly do think they have 3 playable lines, especially where Hayton, Krause, and Kerfoot is only 10,400 because you can fit them in with Colorado. That's why they're playable. I kind of agree with you on Genther, Cooley, and Michelli. Genther and Michelli, only 40 minutes so far this season, but 62 shot attempts for, 40 against, if you extrapolate that to a per 60-minute ratio. In the month of November, Dylan Genther's still leading this team in shot attempts per minute, so he's still the go-to shooting guy. Genther's on the top power play unit, not a great power play spot because, as you mentioned, Vegas is the least penalized team in the league. But at least you get that power play correlation or those power play minutes. Sorry. So for me, it'd be Genther, Cooley, Michelli. If you want to go to Clayton, Schmaltz, and Bukestad, I think that's fine. What I worry about is over the last couple of years, Bukestad and Clayton Keller, 210 minutes together, 2.2 expected goals for per 60 at 5-5. That's just not very good. I would go to Genther, Cooley, Michelli. I think that's my interest on the Utah side. It's probably my main interest in this game. If you want to dip down even cheaper, go to Hayton, Krause, Kerfoot. I would probably do like a Hayton, Kerfoot 2-man or something like that if you want to fit in Colorado or especially a Krause, Kerfoot or something like that. So my interest is more on the Utah side. If I go to Vegas, it's probably the cheap guys. Not a lot of interest in the expensive Vegas top line.
What does a brother have to do to get Krause, Bukestad, Michelli? Just give me a nice little run with them.
I mean, I like Genther, Cooley, and Michelli. I just don't like that their entire top power play is spread across 3 lines.
Yeah. Agreed there. Detroit Red Wings, 3.4 total heading into Anaheim. The Ducks have a 3 total. Lots of ownership in this game. Detroit going Larkin, DeBrincat, Raymond, Kane, Comfort, Kopp, Tarasenko, Casper, Bergen. The Ducks are going Vetrano, Terry Zegras, Carlson, Strome, Killorn, McGinn, Lundestrom, Leeson. The only reason I'm mentioning McGinn, Lundestrom, Leeson is they're projected for 1.4% ownership at 7,700 for reasons I'm not quite sure. I mean, they are playing the Detroit bottom 6, and let's be honest, there's nothing there. But there is a lot of ownership up top here. It is John Gibson confirmed for the Ducks. This is how the Ducks lined up in practice yesterday. I just wanted to confirm that. They didn't run lines in morning skate, but Vetrano, Terry Zegras, 14,200, 12.9% top 2 stack, 22.9% projected ownership. Like, that is the line I would want to play. But that's just asinine ownership. You know what I mean?
Just to jump in, there's no – I don't care if it's a showdown slate. I am never playing an Anaheim Ducks line over 20% ownership. Like, this is just preposterous.
Yeah, this is not bad Nashville chalk from a few years ago. Like, if you want to play them, like, go for it. Like, they are their best line for Toronto, Terry Zegras. Like, at that point, I'm finding the couple $100 to go to Columbus 2. I'm finding the $900 to go to Columbus 1. I'm going to that Cooley line. You know what I mean? There's so many other lines in way less ownership scenarios that I'd go play. You want to play them, that's fine. Carlson, Strome, Killorn, they're not super interesting, but like at 11.8, they're a line that fits with Colorado, and they're coming in at 2% projected. Like if they're in your MME mix, that's fine. Like Anaheim 1, you can do what you want with. I'm on the same side as Cliffy here. I'm not playing a Ducks line over 20%. That's just, a personal preference. If you want to play them, be my guest. The Detroit side also has a lot of ownership. Larkin, DeBrincat, Raymond, 17,800, 20.6% top 2 stack, 17.8% projected ownership. They have positive leverage. I believe they have the second highest top 2 stack of the night. They do. Colorado is more than double them. This is a really, really good matchup for them. They've started to play a little bit better. Like, they were awful 5-on-5 to start this season. like awful. Their damage was on the power play. They've started coming around a little bit 5-on-5. This is an excellent power play matchup. Like, I would much prefer to play Detroit 1 in that high ownership than the Ducks top line in high ownership. Fully correlated. I'll use the back of the baseball card saying, like, you look at the back of their baseball card, they had an excellent sample last year. Then for whatever reason, they booted DeBrincat off that line. I do really like Detroit 1 here. They would be one of my top choices for a mid-range build where you're not spending up for Colorado. Whether you value Vegas or Nashville above them, that's for you to decide. But I do really like them in mid-range builds. I'm fine with that ownership. The second line of Kane, Comfort, Cop is coming in close to 10% projected. That feels bad. Like, I'd rather go play one of those. I'd rather go play like the Huberdeau line or go play one of those other lines in lower ownerships. I'm fine with the Kane one off here because it's a good power play spot. So Detroit 1 for me. The Ducks top line is fine, but that ownership is disgusting. Like, Carlson, Strome, and Killorn, fine for a filler.
This just feels like the night where, like, listen, if Anaheim beats me, they beat me. Again, I've been looking at, more recent trends, I guess you should say, or I should say. Over the last 10 games, Detroit's basically middle of the league by expected goals against at 5-on-5, like an average defensive team. And yeah. And that's the Anaheim Ducks are dead last. Like, dead last. The only reason Anaheim hasn't been getting caved in night after night is because Dostal and Gibson have largely been great this season, especially Dostal when Gibson was out there for the first month or whatever. So it's the most extreme version of the New York Rangers. It's like if Shesterkin isn't on his game, the Rangers could get like 6 goals rung up on them. It's the more extreme version of that, where if Gibson doesn't put up a .930 save percentage, like, Detroit probably pops 5 goals here tonight, right? Like, that's just kind of the way it is. On the penalty kill, Detroit's done a lot of their damage, as you mentioned, on the power play this season. On the penalty kill over their last 10 games, the Anaheim Ducks are giving up 94.5 shots against per 60 minutes on the penalty kill. I can't begin to explain just how bad that is. That's 30 more shots per 60 minutes than the next worst team. This penalty kill is atrocious. I think it's a really good power play spot for Detroit. They have a perfectly correlated top line. They are coming with a lot of ownership, 17.8%. This is one of those spots where I would be fine playing a line at 20% ownership on a 5-game slate, because I'm not worried about any of the 5-on-5 matchups. Certainly not worried about the power play matchup. We've seen Detroit have bad games this season. Maybe they're enjoying a little bit too much sun today. They go into Anaheim and have a bad game. But if Detroit plays they don't even have to be a great team. They just have to be an average team. And with what they can do on the power play, they can that Detroit top line can put up some goals here tonight. So I think Detroit 1 is one of my favorite lines on the slate. If you're not playing Colorado, I think even at 20% ownership, you should probably be at least considering Detroit here. The Detroit second line, I think, is a pass for me. Like, if I'm playing Detroit tonight, I'm just focusing on power play guys. Like, I would rather do Detroit 1 plus Patrick Kane than just Detroit 2. You know what I mean? I would just power play stack the Red Wings. So Detroit 1 is what I like best. If you want to dip down again to Tarasenko Kasper, I think that is a 2-man, Kasper, Berggren, whatever, a 2-man you can throw in with your Colorado stacks if you want to get super cheap. But I do like the Detroit side a lot better. If I were to play the Anaheim side, I'm going to be honest, this is one of the situations where I would go to Carlson, Strome, and Killorn. Just because, like, while this is technically a good power play matchup for Anaheim, Anaheim's power play is so bad that every power play matchup for Anaheim is actually a bad one. So I don't really care about power play correlation for them in this game. Carlson and Killorn have generally been able to generate reasonably well together. They're break even by expected goals per 60 so far this season. Karlsson's still on the top power play unit, so at least you get that. And they have been used more against second and third lines. So I don't think they're necessarily going to see a ton of the Larkin line and the Cedar pairing here tonight. If anything, I would go with the cheaper, much less owned, lower top two stack, but also much less owned line of Karlsson, Strome, and Killorn if I'm playing Anaheim here tonight. But it is a Detroit side I'm more interested in.
Yeah. Like, this line tonight feels very similar to the Dylan Cousins line last night. Like, if they do what they need to do, I'll wake up tomorrow, reserve some contests, and start the show saying you can't hit the nuts if you don't play. I'll be sleeping regardless when that game's going on because I'm old and I can't make it that long anymore. Let's talk about some defensemen. Top of the board, we have Makar, Yossi, Werenski, Karlsson of the John variety, Rasmus Anderson, Moritz Cedar, Mackenzie Weegar. I think, honestly, like Makar, Yossi always in play. I think I'd go Yossi 1, Werenski 2, Makar 3, Moritz Cedar 4. I think Cedar's in a glorious spot here, and he's under 6K. I don't know how, again, haven't built yet, but I don't know if I'm going to be living in the super expensive. I think if I don't play Werenski, I think about as high as I go tonight will be Moritz Cedar. What do you like him?
Yeah, I have Werenski 1 amongst defensemen, and I was looking at the stochastic projections. They have him out in front quite a bit. They have him at over 15 DK points and no other defenseman at 13. So also makes me wonder about ownership. Could be a lot of ownership on Werenski, but if you're not playing Colorado, there really aren't a lot of expensive spots here tonight. So it's not a bad night to pay up. So Werenski, then Yossi. I think Yossi's fairly close behind, especially if you don't want to play Nashville 1 here tonight. I still think it's very much worth playing Yossi because it's such a good power play spot and he's still putting up a lot of peripherals. And of course, Makar, Makar is in play every slate. In the mid price range, Olen Zellweger at 4K is kind of interesting. He's been getting about 21 minutes a game since Cam Fowler went out. It's not a ton of ice time, but Anaheim's not giving a ton of ice time to any of their defensemen. He's still getting good power play time. Yeah, I agree with you on Cedar. Here's kind of my issue with Cedar is that he doesn't shoot, and I don't think it's a good spot for him to block a lot of shots. Like, Anaheim's not a huge shot-taking team unless Cutter Gautier's on the ice. So I do worry about peripherals a little bit, but it is still a good matchup for Cedar. He's 6th by stochastic projections. Sergachev looks like he might go a little bit underappreciated here tonight. It's not a bad spot at home to Vegas, and he's still getting minutes, a lot of minutes at times. So I don't mind Sergachev in the mid-price range either. If you go in cheap, like Dante Fabro, I think he played 19 minutes in that first game with Columbus. He's on the top pair with Werenski. He makes sense. I think Anaheim's morning skate's going on right now. They do rotate their defensemen fairly often. Jackson Lacombe for a very cheap price, I think makes sense. Jeremy Lauzon, he got a minutes bump recently. I'm not sure if it lasts, but I guess he's fine for cheap. Danil Miramanov is around 19 minutes for Calgary. I think he's fine. But honestly, other than Fabro and Lacombe, I think if I were going cheap, I would go to that 3K range, like Simon Edvinsson, Ivan Provorov, Devin Taves, Brady Shea. Like, that's kind of the range that I'm looking in if I'm not paying all the way down for like Fabro or Lacombe, assuming Lacombe plays.
Yeah, I would imagine he play. He's been up over 20. Well, but they do rotate a bunch. But.
It's still Anaheim. Like, I'm honestly waiting for like Olen Zellweger is getting a night off for body maintenance or something. It's
yeah.
Whatever.
Let's talk about goalies. Justice Nguyen, top of the board. Honestly, like, I don't mind him with the team getting healthy. Like, he's been their best goalie, whatever that means. But like 8,200, if he was 8,500, I'd say no. But 8,200, I'm kind of okay with. Cam Talbot at 8K. If it is Talbot, I'm cool with. UC Saros 7,800, Dustin Wolf I like both goalies in the Calgary game, Wolf and Saros. Merzlikins at 7. Like, there's a lot of playable goalies here tonight. It's just like I don't want to name all of them because I could. I've done it before. But if there's a guy you like, you kind of play him. But honestly, my favorites, I'll just give you a couple favorites. It'd be Wolf, Saros, and Merzlikins.
But honestly, those are the 3 goalies that I had. I think I'm leaning to one of the goalies in the Nashville Calgary game. I haven't decided which one yet. Probably Saros. Like, for me, Saros at 7,800 on the road against a team that really struggles to score but can still generate some volume. Like, that seems like the type of spot where I should probably be playing him. And he does have the second highest projection on Stochastic. Him and Wolf are 1 and 2 actually, which is kind of funny to have 2 goalies in the same game projected the highest on a 5-game slate, but that's neither here nor there. I would lean Saros. I think both are fine. Elvis Merzlikins, if you want to pay down a little bit, he's 7,300 at home to Pittsburgh. I think that's perfectly fine. I'm not playing him. I do think Tristan Jarry's kind of interesting because I know goalie ownership doesn't really matter. I can't imagine anybody's going to be playing him at 8,100 on the road in his first game back after his AHL stint. And he was like, I know he had 3 bad games to start the year. He was really good in the AHL. 926 save percentage in 5 starts. So he wasn't great last year, but he wasn't awful, and he just kind of fell apart a little bit down the stretch. Like, if you rebound for 1 game against Columbus, I think it's a good chance to get like a 3% owned Tristan Jarry at 8,100. But like I said, I'm not playing him. I'm probably playing one of the goalies out of the Nashville Calgary game or Merzlikins.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, almost any goalie is playable tonight. I do worry about the Washington starter, but other than that, like, you can make a case for any of the goalies here tonight. Who are you liking for your hat trick pick?
Why not? Returning player, first game of the season, Valery Nichushkin.
You've been a massive Nichushkin guy since he was on the Stars, so that makes some sense. Like, I don't want to go mainstream because, like, you guys obviously know I like Columbus. You guys know I like Detroit, so I'm going to go Dylan Guenther.
I mean, it's a good spot. We do like the Yotes a little bit here tonight.
Yeah, I wish they were still the Yotes, but, you know.
Oh, my God. Well, that's like the 6th or 7th time I've done that this season.
That's why I just call them the Soakers, because I won't forget that.
You keep calling them Utah. Like, I refuse to say hockey club. I'm not saying, oh, the hockey club is hosting the Vegas Golden Knights here tonight. Like, I'm just not. And I'm sick of just saying Utah all the time. I might just start saying Yotes for the hell of it.
Yeah. Yotes is better anyway. Utah Yotes, that's got a nice ring to it. But anyway, I don't know if there's Coyotes in Utah. I'll have to check it out. But we will be back tomorrow for our 6th show in a row because we strong like bull. Good luck, everybody, tonight. Hope you guys win some money. I hope Mike Tyson decapitates Jake Paul, and we'll see you at 2:00 tomorrow.
Good luck tonight, everyone.